When players and coaches often state their formation, they typically state only one. For example, saying we play in a 4-4-2 or a 4-1-4-1. But in reality, no team sticks continuously to only one formation in a game. I don't mean teams changing later in the game to go more attacking if in search for a goal, or more defending if protecting a lead. This obviously occurs. But I mean throughout a game, regardless of the current scoreline, teams next to never keep to just one formation. Most teams play with between 2 to 4 regardless of how the game is going. And this is because formations are rarely stiff. They are fluid structures. To explain this better, let's split the pitch into thirds. You have your middle third, where most of the play usually occurs, building your play or trying to break down the oppositions. This is where you would typically have your default formation, which is the one you would describe your team plays in. Then we have the attacking third, in the opposition's half. You'd usually want more attackers pushing into spaces here to threaten the opposition's goal area to try to score. And then we have the defensive third in our own half, where we would look to get numbers behind the ball to defend effectively, making it much harder for the opposition to score. If we take a formation like the 4-1-4-1, this would be the default formation when building play or trying to gain possession in the middle third of the pitch. But when we're in possession pushing into the attacking third, it's likely you wouldn't want to remain in that formation. If you did, then really, you're saying you want one striker in the opposition's goal area and all your midfield outside of it. Unless your tactics are solely about taking long-range shots, this isn't going to be that threatening, and generally pretty comfortable to defend against. There are many options on how you'd want your formation to change in this position. The most typical would be your wide midfielders pushing up level or just past the edge of the goal area, wanting to receive and play across into the area, attack into the box, or attack across at the far post. You'll then have at least one of your centre mids joining your striker up towards the goal area, with the other hovering outside the area. Your centre defensive mid sitting further back at the start of the attacking third, and with your defenders behind. However, it is likely you would want at least one of your fullbacks pushing forwards depending on which side the ball is on. So, now as you attack, you have moved from a 4-1-4-1 into a 3-1-2-4. Depending on your tactics you choose, this could end up being a variety of formations, such as 3-1-3-3, or even 2-1-3-4. As the play comes back more centrally, you switch back to your default formation. And when transitioning to defending out of possession in your defensive third, you generally want as many players behind the ball in two lines as possible. So the most common switch is to either a 4-5-1, with the striker being the sole outlet and the rest behind the ball, or slightly adjusted to have the centre defensive mid sit further back into the defensive back line and switch to a 5-4-1. If you're asked by someone other than your players what formation you play in, answering with the default 4-1-4-1 in this example is more than acceptable and is what is expected. But we need to be cautious to not fall into the gap of communicating this in the same way to your players. They need to be aware that it depends on where the ball is on the pitch and if you're in or out of possession. This may seem basic, but the point of this is about the coaching communication. There are a lot of women's football coaches who have collectively stated they see a difference between men and women by way of women being more structurally focused. Men may look to repeat patterns at times quicker than female players, but women tend to be more attentive and focused on the reasonings behind movements and structures. And this is where having it in mind about how you communicate these fluid structures comes into play. Maybe you get your players to practice certain attacking and defending movements and exercises, expecting them to repeat them in games. But it will go even further if you can explain the fluid structures to get themselves into those positions and devise exercises on how to transition. This doesn't mean needing to give your players a long lecture. It could be simply saying when progressing the ball to the attacking third, you move into a 3-2-1-4. Or when defending in the defensive third, you move into a low block 4-5-1, then practicing this. It's about effective communication in a way that your ideas can be easily translated by the players. The simplest way is to make the transitions clear by having 3 clear structures per formation as stated. But it is key that you keep these transitions as simple as possible whilst meeting your desired results. There are so many different tactics that can be used for transitions, and it's easy for them to become overly complicated. For example, maybe you start in the 4-1-4-1, but when attacking with the ball, you may say you want to have an inverted right back, so they move into the middle acting as a central defensive mid, whilst your right centre mid pushes to become a right forward,
and your central defensive mid pushes up alongside the left centre mid. Then your striker moves out more to the right wing, whilst your right winger does an underlapping run centrally, and your left back does an overlapping run on the left wing, whilst your left winger doesn't push so far forwards.
It can become too much. Players knowing when and how to transition structures to give you the most opportunity to score or to defend is essential to a team performing in all aspects of the game collectively. But the instructions need to be clear enough and simple enough to effectively practice and not require needing to revise 100 documents and videos of tactics and scenarios before able to implement.